I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. This is our very first try at this, so we're very, very excited about it. And Susan Hubert, the TAMA president, is going to kick off the event for us now. So take it away.
Thanks, Jeannie. You're really doing a fine job, truly. I'd like to give greetings, welcome everybody, and we're just so pleased that you could join the first of our TAMA Talks. I'm Susan Hubert, as Janine said, President for Torrance Art Museum Advocates, also known as TAMA. TAMA supports contemporary art in the South Bay by supporting the Torrance Art Museum. Now, we're only 6 years old, yet thanks to all of our members, in those 6 years, we've done quite a lot. We've advocated with the City Council for better museum funding. We've hosted 2 quite extraordinary art auction fundraisers. We directly supported artists through funding for shipping and stipends to artists. We sent TAM staff to Cuba to do research, meet local artists, make friends, and that resulted in just a truly amazing exhibit of Cuban art. TAMA has purchased video and technical equipment for TAM. We accepted a grant from Macy's for a large exterior mural on the TAM building, which, fingers crossed, will be done by June of 2021. And before we begin, I'd just like to leave you with a fun fact. Art's good for your health. Who knew? I'm not kidding. Norwegian University of Science and Technology conducted research which concluded that viewing art reduces stress, lowers anxiety and depression. So I suggest we do that now. Let's view some art with TAM curator Max Presneill and friends. I'll turn you back over to our rather extraordinary host, TAMA member, and Janine Madden.
Thanks so much, Susan. I appreciate it. So as Susan mentioned, today's TAMA Talks, which is, it sort of generated from the idea that now we have a Zoom account, and we decided to go ahead and begin finally putting together some programming for our very, very loyal and dedicated and patient TAMA members. As the museum's been closed, we haven't been able to do our Friday walkthroughs for docents, and so we are really excited to bring this to you today. And we will be joined then by Max Presneill, the head curator and director of the Torrance Art Museum. And he is joined today by 2 artists who I'm going to have you wave because now you're in the mix with everybody and I don't know who can see. But we have Reid von Brunschot, whose work was featured at the TAM recently in the Baker's Dozen 2020 exhibit, and Ana Carolina Estarita-Guerrero, who has and it's not a film. Tell me what you want me to call it in the dark room.
It's an interactive installation.
Interactive installation, right? So we'll start with a few introductions, a little bit about Max, a very, very little bit about Max. As I mentioned, he is the director and head curator at the museum. In addition to his duties at the museum, he is an unparalleled Los Angeles-based UK working artist in his own right. A list of his extensive showings and curatorial work can be found on his website, maxpresneill.com. And again, I cannot get the chat working, so I will send that to everybody in a follow-up email when we're done. Max is joined today by Ana Carolina Estarita-Guerrero, an immersive media experience designer and animator based in Los Angeles, who earned her MFA in Animation and Digital Arts from the University of Southern California in 2019 and her BA in Visual Arts in 2012 in Colombia. Her work has been shown in Colombia, Mexico, Portugal, Croatia, Switzerland, Canada, and in the United States, predominantly in Los Angeles. In a 2020 interview with Voyage LA, Ana described herself as an immersive media designer and creative technologist. She said, "In my work, I create lively environments using visuals that mix the organic and the digital. These colorful living spaces are rendered through cinematic and interactive virtual reality, projection mapping, mixed reality, or interactive installations." She goes on to say one of her favorite things about the work that she does is the ways that immersive media can connect with all types of people, delivering a high concept message as well as an entertaining experience. And through the years, she's seen adults, kids, academics, artists, and lay people connecting and experiencing the projects she's worked on with the same joy and the same sense of discovery. And so welcome, Anna. We're so glad that you're here today to join us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
We'd also like to welcome Reid von Brunschot. Reid is a Peruvian Dutch American visual artist. She works in sculpture, performance, installations, and video art. Reid received her MFA from USC's Roski School of Art and Design in 2019 and her BFA from the Rietveld Art Academy in Amsterdam in 2011. She has had exhibitions internationally and was recently awarded the 2020 Rima Hortman Foundation Grant for Emerging Artists in Los Angeles. According to Reid, her artworks take on displacement, daily life through the transitional moment, one in which a given situation suddenly and unexpectedly changes, be it in form or in sentiment, by building relationships between unexpected elements through materialization or correlation to the viewer. There is an emphasis on a dialogue between the human and the absurd object. Speaking in quotidian symbolism, her practice is based on themes of childhood, home life, and all things ephemeral. So welcome, Reid. Again, thank you so much for being here today with us. Welcome all of our virtual viewers. This is really so exciting. I wasn't really sure how many folks, and there are still people who are joining us. So I'm just thrilled that so many of you chose to join us today. So this is the public portion. And as we indicated, the public portion is open to anybody who signed up to view it or clicked on the link to view it in their invitation, passed a link on from someone else. For TAMA members, the opportunity after the public portion to listen to our artists through the talk about their thoughts on contemporary art will take place at the conclusion of the public portion of the program. If you're interested in joining TAMA today to listen to that talk with Max, Reid, and Anna, feel free to visit our website, which is tamadvocates.com. Again, I'm sorry about, I was going to just give you a quick little link in chat, but if you are watching and would like to be a part of the conversation afterward, but are not a member, feel free while the conversation's going on to go ahead and join. I'll open that window and keep an eye on it. And with that, I am going to ask that everybody but Max, Reid, and Anna, please turn your video off. You'll still be able to hear. You can hear me. And I will okay. I think that's almost everybody. All right, almost. All right, Audrey, where are you? There you go. Okay. And Max, do you want me to stay on, or I can actually stop my video. I'll still just be listening. Is that okay?
Either way is fine.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. Or maybe I won't be doing that. So I guess as the host, I have to stay on. All right. So,
Should we begin?
yes, I was going to say we are going to go ahead and begin with the interview portion.
Thank you for the introductions. Thank you, Susan, for your introduction to TAMA. And thanks to Anna and Reid, of course, for be here and go through this ordeal. It feels a little deja vu-ish because we did a run through yesterday. So I have to now go into real time. What we'll do to start this is we'll start with Anna because it begins with an A, as we said yesterday. And we'll just, both of the artists will give us a brief run through with some images of the works that they presented in the Baker's Dozen show, which just closed at the museum, and a look at a couple of other works that might inform an idea about the general practice. So Anna, if you want to go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. Well, the work I had, Baker's Dozen is called Circles of Care, is an interactive installation, as we mentioned earlier. And the idea behind Circles of Care is, I'm always thinking about interaction and how people connect with their environment. And the idea of Circles of Care is doing a sort of like simplified, focused, magnified on that idea that we, through our bodies, affect our environment, affect our surroundings. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you can show it. Oh, it's okay. I had to switch to out of the gallery so I can see it larger.
Oh, yeah. Can you? Oh,
are you sharing your screen?
No, I'm actually sharing the video in my video.
Oh, share your screen so we can see it.
Share my screen.
Well, the whole thing. Technical difficulties.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. That's how we start. I'm just gonna then do this very quickly. It's gonna be harder to see the video because I think that some videos or some tends to be like sometimes it breaks. Okay, here it is. And so, can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yes.
The idea behind Circles of Care is, yes, like creating this space that responds to the presence of the visitors, but also changes depending on how many people is there. So the version that we had in Baker's Dozen was a bit different because, well, all the pandemic situation and such sphere was a bit complicated thing. So, but the concept is exactly the same. Is walking into the space changes, and the whole idea is thinking about these relationships that exist between the individual and the environment, and this idea that we tend to think of us as subjects and the environment as an object. And it's like, wait, it's not just, I feel like thinking of the fact that the environment is also subject, and we create a relationship. We are both our circumstances, but also what the environment allows us to do. So somehow when you're standing in there, you are affecting the space is affecting. What you can do depends on what you did before. And it's like a living system. So it changes, it mutates, it grows, depending on how much care, quote unquote, you take of it. And that's what was right now, Baker's Dozen. Another thing, it's always thinking about interaction. So for example, after this project, another project that I work on is Vibration Group. That is this immersive alternate reality experience where basically it follows a group of migrants that are trapped on this spaceship. They had to leave Earth because Earth becomes inhabitable. But then they resist to colonize another planet. And so what they do is that they live on this spaceship forever. And the question that the project asks is, what are these forms of cultural survival that are possible as permanent migrants? And so we did this. We had this amazing, massive thing going on. There was like interactive screens, there was performance, there was VR, and COVID happened. And so it's like, okay, how can we keep doing this on the current world? And so it's thinking, what are the things of the interaction? What is interaction at its most? And so we developed, and this is going to be harder to show. Actually, are you seeing the right screen?
Seeing a drink being handed over.
Okay, great. Yeah, for a moment I was like, wait, I'm not showing the right screen. But then the whole idea was thinking of, and so for example, we did this Zoom performance where we basically, a big part of the performance is the body. There's an opera, and it's like, we create this relationship with the public where we basically invite the public to do physical movements with us, and we create a sort of choreography online. And so it's like, thinking interaction at its base. Like, what is it? What is this space that exists between the participant and the piece? And I like to think that what I do with my work basically is facilitating these interactions. Like, whatever is the medium, it can be whatever happens to be digital, because I think that somehow the digital, the technological tends to add a new twist to things we get used to. And yet it's the real thing has to do, the real connection, the interaction. That's the matter that I like to do. Yes, that's it. We've gone through.
Okay. We're going to move on to Reid.
Anna, that was so fast.
Oh, was it? I'm sorry.
I feel like I have like a really long presentation for you all. All right. Well, I'll try to go as fast as Anna.
No.
I just have a few, a few other works to show. By the way, I'm a big fan of Anna Carolina's work, and I know her from, we both were international fellows at USC, so that's where we met. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming and joining us this afternoon. Again, my name is Reid Van Brunschot, and I just wanted to show you a little bit of like some past works that I've done, and then I'll show you what I participated with in the recent Baker's Dozen exhibition. Like we mentioned, like Janine mentioned, I'm Peruvian and Dutch, which is a very odd mixture, but it informs a lot of where my own work goes, and a lot of that has to do with I speak 4 languages. I've moved all around the world. I've met so many different types of cultures. But what I'm most fascinated by is this kind of global language that we can have with objects. So here is one work I have. Oops. Let me see if it. So I'll just let that play in the background. So for example, I'm interested in these little moments that we could have in home life, domestic life. So, and the way that, you know, if you were to compose certain objects, you can create a narrative with them, a kind of mise en scène. So in this case, I took the plastic that you normally cover furniture with while you're painting in a house, and I created an inflatable from that. I sewed it together. And then every so often it would inflate and deflate. And it has a lot to do with kind of expectation and disillusionment. I created another scene in this was in a solo exhibition in Amsterdam, and I created the whole space completely made out of hollow paper. So my only rule was to use paper and glue. And it was a scene that you could see from the windows outside, and it actually got protested. This and you would think Amsterdam, it was in Amsterdam where it's the place where you have, you know, legalized marijuana use and legalized prostitution and all this kind of stuff, and then people seeing the scene of death somehow was too much for them, so some people wanted to take this show down earlier, but really all it was an empty coffin, you know. Then I'm really fascinated with scale as well, and this is a work I did recently at USC proper, actually, and it's a waiting line, a stanchion of what you find in like banks and airports, and you know, often we encounter these things and they are empty, and we have to make that decision whether or not we have to follow the whole trail or circumvent it and go around the side. Or so I started by making a stanchion that was one foot tall, and then the tallest one is about 8 feet tall. So people can interact with that space. As for the works I did for the Torrance Art Museum, I created a miniature cubicle space. Originally, and it's got all the little details in miniature form from laptop and all those accoutrements that you have in a typical cubicle space. And I did it because I have, while I started studying my Master's of Fine Art program, I started the program and I had a very young child in tow. And while I'm making works, I realized that my head was focused on my son. So it made sense to create works for him. I create spaces, so it made sense to create space for my son. So I'm starting this series, and I hope it's a lifelong series, but it's called Play Spaces for My Son. And the first piece I made was this cubicle. And yeah, I had him perform in this space and took several documentation of it. But I'm left with, in essence, two works. One is this documentation of him performing in it, and the other one is the actual piece itself. I'm sorry, I'm going to try to speed it up. I've got a couple more works that I had in the Torrance Art Museum. One of them is this carpet, and what you see is vacuum lines on a carpet, and what is in the middle of the space is a tower of tiny furniture, dollhouse furniture, and it's all painted in the same color as the carpet. So I'm Peruvian and Dutch, and when we moved to the United States as immigrants, my mother got a job cleaning houses, as many immigrants do, as that story goes. And during the 80s and 90s, I found it really fascinating, the importance of carpet lines and how they become a kind of drawing on carpet. So yeah, this became like an homage to my mother, so to speak, you know, this kind of these lines of kind of class divisions and passive lines that we as children could not cross. We were never to break the carpet lines, you know. And then lastly, I created a series of portraits, actually, of my mother, in giving homage to my mother. 2 years ago, she was fighting cancer, and she was going through chemotherapy. And I think, as many people that have loved ones going through these kind of situations, you don't really know, you know, how much longer you have a family member. So it made sense for me to want to make portraits of her, but in the way that I wanted to do so was I actually took her over to Home Depot, and they can match any color paint, and I had them match her skin color. And they gave me a couple of vials of paint, and I ended up painting these small scenes in her color, in her coloration. And although she was going through chemo, and, you know, while you're going through chemo, your skin kind of gets this kind of flaky, lighter color. And I had her pose in these scenes, and these kind of scenes where I remember, you know, my childhood with her, or the domestic life, or her cleaning up, and anthropomorphized her hands really into this space, but a hand that has labored so much and has meant so much. So yeah, anyway, we can talk more about it if there's more questions, but yeah, that's and so that's that. That's some of my works. Thank you for letting me show you that.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now then, I guess, is I want to start the questions off with a few generalized questions, and I'll start that with a question that goes to both of you, which is both of your works are concerned with an idea of care. And this is something that is essentially a new idea in the art world. There was never a time in my lifetime that I remember anybody suggesting that care was something that artwork should be made about. So my first question is, what does this indicate for the art of our time, the art of the future? Not you need to be a crystal ball about that, but you know, what changes do you think this idea that care can be an integrated idea in artworks? Where do you think that's going to go, and why is it important now? First one up.
Me?
You Either one.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna start by saying that I think that one of the reasons why probably that it's coming up more and more has to do probably with a change of demographics, both the art world and the people who have access to the art world. I was thinking recently I have a fellow artist here in Colombia, and the way she does art is good. And she had this idea that I never thought about. It's like when we think about chefs, when we think about famous chefs, most are men. And cooking is a act of care that has been historically developed by women. And thinking like we have these ideas of like I feel that a lot of it has to do with the change of the demographics. It has to do to I feel with a need of care. Like we've been for so many years in this planet consuming and using, and all suddenly we're faced with the we are faced with the fact that this is not gonna last forever. So we need to take care of that. So somehow I feel that it both has to do with that and the fact that we are finding ourselves in an environment that we thought was taking care of us. We thought we were here to take. Then we're realizing like, wait, so caring is an active thing that we need to do as individuals. And I feel that from my perspective, I think that those are probably some of the reasons why it's becoming way more common than it used to be. And I think that it's just going to become more and more common as an idea. The idea of care as a human thing that needs to happen. I think that we need to think about.
Yeah, I would just jump on those coattails and agree. I think that first that the kind of the relationship, like we've mostly had, I could say, male artists have the limelight for a long time, and I think, you know, and I'm not going to say it's recent, but yeah, over the last couple decades, we're having, you know, obviously more space for women to speak. I mean, about time, yeah. But and it seems natural to speak about the things currently going on in our lives and with more confidence, you know, like without having to hide it or become more masculine in the way of creating our art, you know, or showing it. Yeah, that's so I'm completely in agreement with.
Do you think that direction in art though is covered with men becoming more caring in their artworks?
Yeah, I can imagine so, you know, there is the kind of the liberation of showing of emotions, that it is okay, you know, to show more emotion.
It does seem to be a link in with things to do with social issues, awareness and climate change and all these other things all coming together at about the same time that we're seeing a reflection in the way that art's being made, of course. And you're right, I think that the as we can see by the demographics on here, there's been a shift than it would have been 20 years ago. So, okay, so there's a couple of other things I want to move immediately into, which is in the works that you've made, Anna, I mean, it's experiential. And with that being the case, in parallel to Reid's work, which are subjective, have a subjectivity about them rather, to do with a personal narrative, which can only ever be experiential in gaining that subjectivity. There seems to me a link between how the experiential, of course, is always subjective, and how the subjective is gained through the experiential. Now, my question to both of you is, being as you individually carry on in very different directions in your artworks, is what are the differences and what are the similarities between experiential and subjectivity, vice versa?
You want to go first, Reid? So it's not always me first.
Yeah, your name starts with A. No, I I can only speak for, at least for my work. Let's see. It's funny. I always think that I'm posing an artwork that I find that many people can connect to. So it's funny, which it is true. It's kind of like a diary. It's subjective to my situation, but I feel that when I think about persons all over this world, when I think about people, I think about that everyone in some sense has some sort of chair, some sort of table, some sort of first kiss, some sort of birthday, some funeral that they've gone to. And through, at least through my work, even though the seed that creates the work is something personal, I try to leave it as generic or neutral or open-ended, or trying to use this kind of language that allows for other people to connect to these sculptures or scenes that I create, so that they can place themselves within that scene, and that kind of allowing for that interactivity. So when I think about like subjectivity, and then you speak of, interaction, that's how I pose it. It's I have a classroom of students, and I often say I like to pick the most generic thing, the kind of thing that when I say imagine like tidy whitey underwear, close your eyes, and it's the most generic version of that, or a sock, or a chair. And that's the language that I hoped, to pick in my work, and hope that it connects with enough people. And I realize as I say that it speaks mostly to like a westernized canon, of people, but yeah, that's if that can answer any of your question as far as my approach to that.
It makes me think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel that one of the things that happens with experiential work is that it doesn't exist without the subject. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you have, for example, if circles of care is standing there and no one ever touches it, the piece never starts. So somehow, I mean, it's impossible. And I feel like that's the first thing. And the other thing, it has to do with I'm thinking similar to what Reid says. I always try to think about, like, I have this thing that when I was on my undergrad, who was my senior advisor told me, and it's like art, the job of art is finding the invisible forces, like making evident these forces that are going everywhere in all these directions that we never see. And I always think like the invisible forces are usually the most basic. So for example, touch. For example, read on the piece of the extensors of the line, it's a scale. It's like we have a body, you have a body. Like we all have bodies, and in different levels of ableness, in different contexts. Like we carry different things on our body, but all our bodies have mass. All our bodies have weight. All our bodies have a size, have a color, and like what I try to do is that I try to take these features of the body and use it, because that's clearly a thing that we share. And so in circles of care, naturally the body produces static and some electricity. What happens on that piece is that I have a capacitive sensor. What that means is that it's like a battery that is charged to 99%. When you touch it, you add the 1% that is missing, and the piece starts. But what happens is that different people have different levels of electric charge on their body. So for example, some people cannot activate it alone. They need other person to activate it. So it becomes this thing like, oh, if you touch someone on the shoulder while they're touching the piece starts. If you're both touching the spear, the piece starts. But then even though there's like a different way to go through it, there's always the thing of the body has a lot of, and this is a weird way of saying it, but a lot of properties that I feel we'll connect, we'll have them. And that's what the thing that I try to get, like that very basic. Distance on the space, where you are standing, what's your mass, what's your electricity value, and yeah, that's it. That's for me.
You know, what that kind of reminds me is that, of course, all experiences are subjective. They're all contained within the I, but then somehow we all share enough of them that, in the same way as we do language, that we share enough of those to make sense of things in the world. And partly, I guess, it's what explains why abstraction in painting, for instance, can still work. Because it's partly a shared language, a formal language that we can share, like we do in all artworks, but it's also it's an alignment in some ways with the visual that allows us some kind of entry into the thoughts of others, hence empathy and perhaps the growth of care in artworks now. So a more specific question then. I'll start with Reid. For the works that you've got in the Baker's Dozen show, all have a link to the past and aging and temporality, but they're all static objects, of course. And so there is immediately a dichotomy, whereas, say, Anna's work is of the moment and by its very nature passes second to second. How do you feel about that dichotomy between the object being a static temporal object, talking about a passing transient temporality?
Well, often I create more installation spaces, so it's different to have just a sculpture which people have to look at, and that's about it. They can't necessarily interact with it. So yeah, it's a bit different for me to do that. However, when I play with scale, at least when I think about like the cubicle that I made.
Excuse me.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
it needs to. I just muted them. When I think about scale, you need a viewer, right? Like all scale is based on we as humans are the way we view art, we always base it in connection to ourselves, right? So like if we see something very tiny, it's miniature to the body, and if we see something larger than us, it's huge, right? And so I think it's maybe a cheesy answer, but I think a lot of it depends on like having the viewer there is needed in order for the piece to work. Its scale. Whereas I did something different with the photographs of my mother. I created a scene that, again, if it was just a scene on its own, you would not understand its sense of.
I'm going to move over to a question for Anna, which is traditionally, of course, we always think about artworks being made by the individual artist. And by all the technology and all the aspects that come into your work, there's a large degree of collaboration in your work. How do you think of your work in terms of an individual artist when there is that degree of collaboration, more like a band?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question, because one of the things that I think that happens with collaboration is that you do one thing. I remember talking with Reid after we said Baker's Dozen, and she was saying something about being like, she knows how she wants the things, stuff has to be like that. And most of my friends are to say that. For me, it's a bit of like, I have a prompt. I like to think like it's procedural. I have a prompt, and when you do like a procedural thing, what you basically do is like you say to the computer, take these variables, run this experiment, and let's see where it goes. And I feel that the way that I am able to live on that dichotomy of like, yeah, like this thing of like, I put so much of my work of me on this work, it's mine, and yet this work is not mine, it's ours, is thinking, it's like I just think of a prompt, and I just let it run. And it's like, okay, this is the idea, this is what it's going on my mind, this is an experiment, it's almost like an experiment. And there's a lot of variables that at the end I don't control. And a lot of times what happens on the end, it's not exactly what I want. Because that's the thing when you're working with other people and there's like other things going on, and other times I have more control on the front. Like sometimes I can have more variables, and sometimes I have more. For example, Circles of Care is a very controlled piece. But Vibration Group, that is this performance, that is 16 performers. There's, I mean, of course, there's not as much control. And so it's this thing that mutates and grows. And it's like, I have no idea, but I imagine that it's this thing that it says like your child, like it just grows and does thing. And then I see it and it's like, whoa, now Vibration Group is asking for this. So I guess this is what we're going to do now. But the piece itself, it's like this thing that is growing. And it's just like this relationship with a prompt, with an idea that I just let run. And for moments, I jump back and like say like, okay, let's try in this direction. But for moments, I just let it grow. So it's like, and I do think that there's some piece on it too, on like letting it wrong. There's that I feel that sometimes when I try to be more controlling of everything, I want everything to be this exact way. There's some things that are also, some things are gained, some things are lost. For me, it's a lot of thinking about it like a procedural thing. Like I just give a bunch of prompts and I see where they arrive. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, so I think we're at the end of the first session. So if Janine wants to jump back on, I believe that we head into the next part now.
Yes, yes. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and stop the recording portion. Hopefully I can work some editing magic and do a little editing, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording portion.